Okay, ready? Yeah, almost. Okay, we're good. All right, last event of the day. Acoustics are terrible. Hi. So I'm Bruce Sterling, art director of Share Festival, and this is Alessandro Ludovico, editor-in-chief of Neural Magazine. So Alessandro here.
Hi, everybody.
Besides being on the Share Festival jury, is an extremely erudite technology arts journalist and really knows more about it than almost anyone we know at Share Festival. He's a very top-ranked guy. Knows all about Europe, all about. This is the very latest issue, which I'm going to be very happy to read. So, in following our Searchlight theme, I'm going to ask the distinguished journalist here what we at the festival should be paying attention to in the next 1, 2, 3 years. Because we have been through a crisis. We had lockdown, we had pandemic. The music scene was in a coma, the cinema scene was in a coma. There were no events like Share Festival, they were all closed. The only thing that was happening was basically non-fungible tokens on blockchains on screens. And okay, we're now past the lockdown phase and we have to understand what to pay attention to. So, Alessandro's magazine is famous for its many topics that it covers in contemporary technology culture, digital culture, activism, internet, and so on. So I'm going to ask him about 30 questions because we have 30 minutes. And these are going to be very fast. And we're going to rate these topics. Do they belong in the Searchlight or do they belong in the darkness? Like on a rating of 1 to 10. If it's 10, we need to pay a lot of attention. And if it's 1, we need to pay no attention and maybe just stop. Okay, and these are going to be in alphabetical order. So, Alessandro, topic number 1, political activism.
Yeah, that I think, thanks for a wonderful introduction. Never dreamed about something like that. But political activism, well, I think it's a very nodal topic now. Extremely important, but it has to be taken with a grain of salt somehow, because it needs to go through different generations and to permeate different cultures, from the youngest one who have a very different approach compared to our generations, basically.
I'm inclined to agree with you. And also, I think when you have a war, conventional politics tends to be eclipsed. I mean, there's a war in Europe, and it's going to be very hard to manage with conventional political activism. Okay, topic number 2, aesthetics. Do you think we ought to worry a lot about whether things are beautiful or not?
Yeah, but I wonder, I mean, what the aesthetics canons somehow nowadays. I mean, you just mentioned NFTs, and one of the blames against NFTs is, of course, that they are mostly centered on the market, on this kind of flash way of spreading on one side and to gathering money on the other. And it's quite hard to find an aesthetic canon, an aesthetic trajectory somehow that can go through them.
I think it's pretty obvious that Bored Apes and CryptoPunks are really ugly and that this is a problem. No, I also think that Italians are generally very good at aesthetics and aesthetics doctrine. And this is probably something we need to pay more attention to rather than less. I'd rate that about a 7. Okay, now archives. Do you think we ought to be paying more attention to the stuff we've already done?
Well, that's a soft spot for me because with Neural we have an archive project. So I would say no, of course. I do think that we should pay more attention to archives. Archiving the present on one side, which is more often than not, especially in the digital slippering, and just lost after a very little amount of time, but also digging into past archives. We were chatting today about a couple ones here in the city, which we think are particularly interesting for media history in general.
Yeah, I think Italy is one of the few places in the world that actually has a technology art heritage. I mean, people have been doing technology art in Europe since the 50s, and in the early 60s, there was a lot of very active tech art stuff coming out of Milano and Rome and Torino. So, I don't want us to be archaeologists, but I think it's important to realize that eventually we end up in the cinema museum. I mean, that's where everything in Torino seems to go.
Yeah, and then the RAI, I was also mentioning the small technical museum that the RAI has. But just to add for 1 second, because there are plenty of schools here, and you just mentioned something which I believe it's quite seminal in Italy, which are these experiments of Italian avant-garde artists, writers during the 60s and 50s. Wouldn't it be finally the time to teach these experiments in schools as well?
I love that idea, actually. I think, reconstituting old tech art is a very important thing. Okay, now, art, meaning fine art, which is not technology art. At Share Festival, every time we put out a call, we always get painters. Like somebody wants to put their canvas in our show. And, traditionally our problem has been, as a technology art show, we have like a difficult relationship with the fine art world. But I'm wondering if maybe we shouldn't be kinder to people from fine art, right? I mean, should we be dealing with painters, with sculptors, with ballet people, with opera people? I mean, should we be more open to the conventional analog art tradition?
Should we? Well, yes, even if, as I do, that there has always been quite, a kind of a canyon separating these two worlds somehow. So building a bridge towards these different worlds, which are still probably quite separated, would be beneficial for sure. But still, we should meet in the middle somehow, which I think it's the main question, instead of, let's say, us going there somehow or hosting these forms of art in their original form. So a more negotiable relationship, I would say.
Well, I think meeting in the middle sounds nice, but I think in some ways it's actually harder for us to reach out to them than it is for them to reach out to us.
Yeah, I know.
It's really a political problem in the art world. Okay, now art hacking. Right? What do you think about that topic?
Well, I mean, it can be interpreted in many different ways, but in the magazine has always been hacking what is perceived as the contemporary art system and especially market. And there are artists who have done it as a work of art, and they have been quite appreciated more often than not, even by the contemporary art world, because they like, I mean, the contemporary art world likes these things. I think that, I mean, in the original, better than me, the original meaning of hacking, it should be incredibly useful in order to understand contemporaneity, to push hacking practices in order to deconstruct the systems that we take for granted.
Paolo Cirio is an old friend of Share Festival, and he's a Turinese guy or Piedmontese guy. I've been in New York, and recently I consider him one of the best conceptual art hackers in the world. But recently he was complaining that there was no way to record his work. I mean, he'd done these interventions, but then the technological system he had hacked had gone away, and there's no trace of his art left, which I think is a problem.
It is. It absolutely is. But isn't it in the same, let's say, spirit and practice of hacking? I'm asking.
Well, he's a genius hacker, but the problem with hacking is that you don't control the means of production. You just took something that was there and you intervened with it. And if the thing itself disappears, you have no way to keep it. You didn't build it, so you can't preserve it.
Yeah, but that's the same as performance art in the 70s. They were creating system, somehow intervening, and then there's basically nothing left after 40 years.
This is going to be a problem. Okay, next topic, artificial intelligence art.
Well, who am I to say that artificial intelligence wouldn't be important in the future? I think that, of course, there's a big bubble around it. It's truly overestimated in many respects. Still, there is a true potential. My main issue with artificial intelligence is this spirit of delegating to the machine the control, to say, okay, the machine can do it by itself. I think it should be exactly the other way around. We should really work together with the machine somehow.
Yeah, well, we've been getting a lot of artificial intelligence art stuff in our proposals, and I tend to shy away from the ones that say, I'm collaborating with my friend the machine, because I think that's bullshit, frankly. But I'm very impressed by stuff that's going on in neural nets and deep learners, especially stuff like Imagine and DALL-E. And, I don't think those are classic artificial intelligence. I know people who are artificial intelligence scientists who call that alt intelligence. And, and I actually kind of like that coinage. I think we could do a lot as a festival to encourage artificial intelligence art that's of the kind you describe, right? Not obscuring and not fake, not Alexa from Amazon Incorporated, but, really like a new media thing. Okay, bookshops. You're very interested in books and publishing. And this year we actually published a book at Share Festival, the little task lamp book. Do you think we ought to publish more books or maybe a magazine?
Well, I'm really partial here. I can't be objective because I've been into publishing for 3 decades. I do think that printed books have a different value now. So anytime I'm trying to push the publication of books, of course, I'm not trying to say that we should just publish new books. I'm trying to say that we should make a good effort in curating, editing great books, but publishing them also in print rather than digitally only.
Well, I think it ties in with the archive things. And I'm a book writer, so I'm also prejudiced toward books, but they're very expensive and they're hard to do well. But on the other hand, after 50 years, commonly the artist's book is all you have left.
Yes.
So, I'm thinking maybe if we do this, we should be doing things that are testimonies of artists rather than, news or something along that line.
Absolutely.
Okay, circuit bending. Okay, we're at Maker Faire here. Got a lot of circuit bender guys. What do you think about that?
I think it was such an enlightening practice a while ago to really transform something that, again, everybody was taking for granted. I think that now it's completely embedded in the making practice, but it has become more and more difficult to practice because of the complexity of hardware in general. So I think somehow it belongs to the past as a practice, but it's still quite a powerful concept and very connected to the hacking.
Well, at least it's cheap to do because you don't have to actually manufacture the hardware, and you can get some surprising effects that way. But I think we're better off manufacturing circuits rather than bending circuits that somebody else manufactured. It's like the art hack. You're hacking electronics instead of really doing it. Okay, now what do you think about computer science as opposed to computer art? Should we be paying more attention to the laboratory and to technical discoveries?
Well, here I put the hat of the academic for a second because in the university I work for, there's a huge push to have interdisciplinary projects between the whatever science field, including computer science and art. And it's a mutual interest somehow. So, yes, I do think that there should be more collaboration, direct collaboration, because if it's done in the proper way, it can be mutually inspiring rather than just applying some computer science in art and vice versa.
Well, traditionally, computer art people have been quite close to the computer business because they get hired by a company to be artists in residence. But I actually think artists are kind of emotionally closer to the scientists than they are to the companies. And that, if you're going to collaborate with somebody, you'd be better off collaborating with Google's researchers than collaborating with Google per se, right? So I think we should try to be kinder to them and reach out to them a bit more.
Yes.
Okay, now, as another political question, counterculture.
Okay,
is it even there? Do we have any left?
Well, for my, little bit of research that I'm constantly doing for the magazine, there is, but there are small pockets and not extremely visible. The main thing is that there's a counterculture when there's a dominant culture, and now everything seems to just be fluid. So it's very hard to position yourself when the very moment you position, you are absorbed by this fluctuating information, especially on social media. They are just repositioned almost automatically. So it's an old concept, the counterculture, but still, if you have your own small network, for example, and for example, you call off your network or your group from the major systems, then I think there should still be counterculture.
It's not the same that it was, and even electronic counterculture is not the same thing. I mean, there was a period there where you were quite a strange guy, even if you just had internet email. But I think we need to put that notion behind us because, technology platforms are just the biggest and the most dominant companies in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, this is the establishment. I mean, Apple used to think different. They were, in fact, very counterculture. People at Apple like to do a lot of lysergic acid, and they had long hair and they were weird, but that's the most profitable company in the world, and that's just how it is. So there may be countercultures, but they're not the ones that we know. All right, electronic art, as opposed to digital art. I mean, art made with electronics per se.
Okay, there's a kind of a game in the, let's say, technological art scene on definitions. So electronic art and digital art and new media art, and there's a bunch of them. And they are interpreted differently depending on who you ask. So if we qualify electronic art, let's say, as the old thing, or as the one that directly intervenes with electronics, then I think on one side is a thing of the past, because the current thing is what we have here around, the makers. So, yeah.
Well, I think the distinction there that's interesting is electronic art that is not on the web or not on the cloud or not in the Internet of Things. It's just an electronic device that's sitting there alone doing something. And, my feeling toward those is very friendly. I think, these kind of one-off devices, we ought to cherish people who make those.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Especially if they're disconnected.
All right. Now, the issue of exhibition, because Share Festival is a festival and we have shows like this, but we also have, this is one of our main problems, I think, literally how to display things. Where do we put them? Where are they? We've never had a steady venue. We don't have our own exhibit hall. We don't have our own museum. We don't have our own dedicated space. Do you think we ought to work at that? Do we need for our festival to actually have a dedicated exhibit space that we control?
Well, all the festivals I know, even those who are who are 40 years old, they don't have a fixed venue still. So I'm not sure that the fixed venue is the thing to look for, but at the same time, the format of the exhibition, I think it's very important. But still, having a curated collection of artworks that it's recognizable as such, and there's some curatorial work behind, it's still a quite powerful format. I would say that, I mean, the exhibition is very attached to the art world. So as much as it can be infiltrated into the art world, possibly the better. Or the other way around, having spaces which are completely disconnected from the art world and formats that we might even just invent to put artworks where they are not supposed to be.
I don't see how we get away from this problem. I really think this is a #1 problem for us. Okay, feminism.
Well, I'm not probably the best person to comment. There should be a woman, obviously, commenting on that. But from a man perspective, is absolutely crucial and absolutely crucial. Paying attention, especially of all the different trajectories of feminism that have emerged in the last few years. I would say especially from the younger generations, because they have an approach when I have the chance to confront with them, which is extremely more, let's say, liberated and free from, let's say, with no strings attached compared to what we used to have. So I would give a very careful attention to that.
Yeah, I think the tech art scene is one of the rare areas in technology where there are really a lot of women around and doing really significant work. But I think probably the biggest problem there is that they tend to be forgotten. For some reason, you could be a woman and sort of do all kinds of cool stuff and be surrounded, and yet you don't end up in the canon somehow. You're always, the girlfriend or the secretary or the organizer or the nurse or somebody, and you never get to be kind of the heroic establishment figure. And I think that's kind of an archival problem, because there've been women in tech art forever.
Also,
just tons of them. And doing very effective stuff.
I absolutely agree. It's also connected to the archival a lot.
So, I don't think it's more like you recruit them. It's more like you try to maintain some awareness of how much they have contributed.
Yeah.
Okay, so home devices, like just gizmos for the house. Sometimes we've done shows on this. It's like, you could put this in your house. It's like, or, just demonstrated things that are there. What do you think about those? Just kind of gadgets, kind of fun commercial things to have.
What do you exactly mean by that?
Well, these, home devices are just like,
okay.
Well, they're like the personal computer, or just like little tech toys for the home, wearables.
Well, honestly, I think we are already. They are everywhere. Long story short, I wouldn't pay that much attention to them unless, the deconstruction of their logic could be interesting, but sometimes there's such an pervasive presence that they are just there, so there's no chance anymore.
Well, when they're domestic, they don't seem very artistic. But on the other hand, people have a different personal relationship to them then.
True.
Yeah, well, I rank them about a 5. Okay, how about heavy industry, like manufacturing, the assembly lines, cars, jets, satellites?
Well, there's this whole extractivism political movement in both political sciences and art as well, which is trying to define how the heavy industry is producing, actually, through the extraction of resources in many different respects. I think we live this contradiction of using the product of industry since so long and taking it for granted. And on the other side, not thinking that much about the heavy consequences of that kind of industrial process. So I think it should be something to pay attention, definitely, but from a very critical perspective.
Well, it's part of Turinese history. This is a heavy industrial town, and here we are in an abandoned industrial building, and there's just tons of that around. I don't think we'll ever be able to escape it. But I also think the ability to manufacture things in large volume is very technically important, and the skills of engineers are really important to the art world. So I think that's going to rate a 7 or 8 for us. I don't think we can get away from that. Okay, installation art, like art thing that's big enough to walk into. Do you think we need more of those in our festival or less?
Well, it's very connected to the exhibition thing. I mean, it's embedded in the concept of what kind of exhibition. Generally speaking, yes, because it's connected also to the experience of art that you have. Having the possibility to walk in a dark room and experience a video art or a specific installation art, I think it's quite an experience, actually. And that's similar for many other kind of installations.
I actually like the ones that the environments you walk into better than the ones you strap on your head. I mean, they have a lot of relationships to game design, but and when we've done installations at Share Festival, they tend to be quite popular. People really like to line up and sort of go on in there. So, hopefully we'll do more. I'd rate that one about a 7. Okay, now how about net.art and internet-based art? This was our heritage originally. We were like a net.art scene. And, so what are we going to do with our net.art heritage? And what future do you see in this kind of internet-style network-based art?
That's one of the toughest, of course, because of the heritage, because of the fact that we belong to, because, I mean, for me, being a part of an art avant-garde has been an unforgettable experience in life, of course. It's one of the very rare chances, but it's very hard to define now what internet art could be, because when there were 20,000 people in the whole Italy connected to internet, then we could claim that we were doing internet art. But when it becomes something of the everyday or of the every moment, actually, it's very hard to claim something like that. I think that there are a few works which are, we can still define internet art, but I would look at that more in terms of heritage rather than contemporaneity.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. And, the founders of net.art always said the art was in the dot, right? And I think it's important not to be sentimental about it just because we're old school people who saw it and were really excited about it. Yeah. It's kind of hard to reheat that souffle, but I think maybe we can maintain the spirit of it in some other way. Okay. Kinetic art, like just big devices that drift around or go bang, right? They're not electronic. They're not hooked up to the internet necessarily. They're literally machine art, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, it's in the spirit of making truly the mechanics and the create. And I mean, for me, the most interesting part is that with mechanics and trying to make a piece of kinetic art object, you are basically defining a system. So it has the same, for me, attraction that an excellent piece of engineering can have, or a clever hacking can have. Paradoxically enough, we were just talking about internet art and how it can paradoxically sound like as obsolete and kinetic, and so mechanics, which should sound even more obsolete. I think that it's the other way around, because materiality, I think, is going to acquire more and more a special quality for us, especially because we are completely embedded and attached with the digital world and communication.
I'm a fanatic for kinetic art. I just love machine art, but I think it's got the problem that it doesn't have a good critical assessment. It's like nobody explains why a particular piece of machine art is better than another one, right? Like Emmanuel Andel's knife hand chop bot was maybe the most popular exhibit we ever had in Share Festival. And it was basically a knife that might cut your fingers off, which doesn't sound very artistic, but it was really, really a thrilling device. And people just lined up, to engage with this seemingly dangerous terror toy, right? Even little kids love that thing. But nobody's ever written an essay to describe whether that's good or bad, or why. I don't know. I mean, it seems to me like an area where maybe we could do something, because people in Torino, there's a lot of engineers and a lot of people who are skilled at making devices, and they're not on the internet. They're not NFTs. They're very attractive. People like them. I'd rate it a 9.
I mean, there was an historical piece of Kinetic Art in Milan in the 60s. So again, interconnecting the archive with the present and interdisciplinarity.
Okay, we're running out of time before we've run out of your topics, but you have hundreds of topics in your magazine. It's amazing how much ground this guy covers. So I'm just going to ask you 2 more, but they're pretty good. Robots. What do you think about art robots?
But that's something that, is having a lot of attention now. I think that the reason why is that the current and probably future robots are more and more anthropomorphic. So our projection towards the robots, this thrill to have an autonomous, alive entity, which is artificial at the same time, it's something extremely seducing. And so artists, there's quite a few artists dedicating to that. So I think that's definitely, for many reasons, including this cultural and even psychological one, area to explore in the near future.
Well, people don't know this, but Italian industry is actually very good at robots. Italian robots really have a lot of world respect. And we've never really reached out to the Italian robot community and sort of said, can we make art with your soft robot or whatever? And maybe we should try a thing like that. And then last, but probably not least, virtual reality and metaverses. What do you think, Alessandro?
Okay. Well, I can make I can spoil something, because next issue of Neuro will be about alternative metaverses. We are kind of finishing it, so it seems like that we talked about that already, but it's not, I can tell you. So very happy accident. Well, there's an incredible, for me, investment by the industry in these technologies. I personally don't see the human-centered qualities, but I can see the industrial perspective. Personally, having been in virtual reality, my very first publication in 1992 was about virtual reality, and I know that since a very long time. Still, I'm skeptical for such a big investment in industrial solutions. For me, the most interesting aspect is the perception of space and time that completely changes when you are completely surrounded in a virtual dimension. I think that, generally speaking, I would even argue that all technological art affects the perception of time and space. And then it's an area worth probably to explore, but all the possible areas that would give us a clue about how to deal with in our own time, but with different perceptions of time and space would be worth.
It's a very interesting topic and a very old topic. People don't realize how long virtual reality has been around and how much of a heritage it has, but I don't think we'll have to pay a lot of attention to it, because so much venture money is going there that it's going to be forced on us. We'll just have to deal with it one way or another. So that's it. Thanks for the benefit of your expertise.
Thanks a lot.